Hello, everyone. Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Jonathan Miller, U.S. Hemp Roundtable General Counsel. Jonathan Miller, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you. Really excited to have you on today. A lot of the larger federal issues that a lot of my guests, particularly business owners and anybody involved in cannabis, they're facing challenges, and so I'm really excited to have you on today and to talk about some of those things.
I'm glad to be with you.
Awesome. Well, hey, for those listening, as I mentioned, I have Jonathan Miller on. He's member in charge at Frost Brown Todd LLC, which is a large law firm located in Lexington, Kentucky. But he's also the general counsel for the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, which is a coalition of dozens of leading companies and organizations committed to safe hemp and CBD products. So, as I mentioned, Jonathan is really on the front lines, talking with members of Congress, the House, and the Senate, and really pushing for more regulation when it comes to cannabis. So, Jonathan, before we jump into all these different topics that I have prepared, let's first let the audience know a little bit about your background. So, I understand that you were a politician previously, and then when was it that you moved and transitioned into cannabis, and why?
Yeah, I'm a recovering politician. I was the state treasurer of Kentucky, elected to 2 terms from 1999 to 2007. I got out of politics, went into practicing law, and had absolutely nothing to do with either cannabis or agriculture. I decided to start writing for big online magazines like Huffington Post, Daily Beast, and one day I just decided to write a column that it was time to legalize cannabis. The agriculture commissioner at the time read that article and said, well, we're going to start a effort to legalize hemp here in Kentucky. Will you help me with that? And I said, well, if I'm for marijuana, I guess I'm for hemp. I didn't really know the difference. And so on a wing and a prayer, I just decided to help him. And we were successful. We got the attention of Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader, and worked with him on the 2014 Farm Bill, which created the pilot programs and developed an organization which ultimately became the U.S. Hemp Roundtable to serve as the national advocacy organization for the industry. And so having nothing to do with cannabis or agriculture is now my entire life. And I work every day on these issues.
Well, and just to back up a bit, so when did you come to draw that conclusion to write that article about, now's the time, it's about time we legalize this plant now,
Well, I'm a liberal Democrat, and those are pretty rare in Kentucky. And when I was in politics, I really had to hide some of my more liberal views. So when I got out of politics, it was an opportunity for me to start talking about things I was passionate about. Right at the outset, the issue I was most passionate about was marriage equality, and so I wrote a column on that, and it was very well received. And I went through a number of other issues like that, and ultimately ran into cannabis legalization. I had really not studied very much on it. I decided it was important to take a look at, and really felt that it was an important issue, particularly the long history of criminal overreaction, the war on drugs, and how it criminalized the mere possession of something that is much less harmful than, say, alcohol or tobacco. And I just decided to write that article, and it changed my life.
Wow. Yeah, and absolutely. When you say, I mean, not to mention how many people, offenses and people we've thrown in jail because of the plant, and now it's ironically it's deemed essential, right? Which
Yeah.
is a whole other topic that we can get into. And what year was this when you had this epiphany?
2011 to 2012 is when I got on this train and really got active in getting legislation passed in Kentucky in 2013, and then the 2014 Farm Bill in Congress.
Hmm. Yeah. So, and what's amazing about how that is that was in 2011, and how much things have progressed since then. I mean, you touched on the 2014 Farm Bill, which was basically allowed for a pilot program, right, for the various states to participate in when it came to mass cultivations of hemp.
Yeah, no, that's correct. And that was our first salvo. Kentucky had passed legalization. And so we wanted to go to Congress and say, hey, there are states like Kentucky and Colorado and Oregon. There were a couple others that wanted to start experimenting with this. And Congress said, okay. And that led to a gold rush. We're now up to 49 states that have developed authorization. Too bad Idaho is the remaining holdout, but maybe next year we'll get them.
Come on, Idaho. You got this. You can do it. Well, let's talk. I want to get into this in a timeline, kind of chronological order, if you will, to really help our audience see how this has progressed over the years. So we touched on the 2014 Farm Bill, and then we fast forward to 2018, where the Farm Bill is passed, and that now allows for mass cultivation of hemp for every state, right? But the one stipulation was that the state was required to submit their plan on how they were planning to regulate it. Is that right?
Yeah, the during the interim between 2014 and 2018, there was a lot of interference by the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. They tried to prevent the importation of hemp seeds. We had to go to court 3 times to block that. They were arguing that hemp could not be transported interstate. There was a lot of discussion about hemp products like CBD being illegal. And so getting the 2018 Farm Bill passed to permanently legalize hemp was critical. States still have to, yes, you're right, states now have to get approval from the USDA for their programs, but the USDA has come out with interim regulations, which have been overly restrictive, overly burdensome, and a real problem for a lot of farmers. And so many states still are operating under the authority of the 2014 Farm Bill. And we just went back to Congress and got an extension of their ability to do that through September of next year. So we're hoping that the USDA can start working out the kinks, and perhaps if we have a new president, we might have a new secretary there, and we might have a more relaxed regime.
Well, let's talk about specifically the DEA's final interim rules and how it's affecting the current hemp industry.
Yeah, so the DEA just issued interim final rules a little over a month ago, and they said that we're just trying to codify existing law, but there's some provisions, and particularly one that really troublesome, and that was that the DEA is seeming to interpret in-process hemp, so hemp that has been grown and harvested and now is in process of turning into extract CBD. We know, everyone's known that during that processing, the THC level will spike to above 0.3% THC. That's natural. But everybody then will remediate that down before it becomes a final product to less than 0.3% THC. The DEA's rules would seem to imply that anytime it's over 0.3% THC, it's a controlled substance. And so understand that the implications of that. The DEA says, well, we're not going to enforce on that. We're too busy with opioids. But what if one agent decides to enforce on it? Or what if a state official takes that to enforce on it? Those are criminal penalties. That's like you're possessing heroin or you're manufacturing heroin. So, I mean, this is serious stuff, and it's why we've objected to it. We've filed our comments, and we're working with Congress and the court system to try to overturn it.
Right. And just to add on to that, I think it's important for our listeners to understand that naturally the cannabis plant produces THC or THCV, I think, to protect itself from UV sun rays, right? So it's basically an inherent defense mechanism for the plant. And to your point, it naturally spikes throughout its growing process due to, amount of it being in the sun and other factors, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And Congress never intended for that to be a problem. Congress doesn't, uh, for what it's worth. I mean, those of us who again agree with marijuana legalization, we don't think that THC is a problem. Uh, there at least is a majority in Congress right now, or at least enough to block marijuana legalization, that believes it's a problem. They don't want people getting high. And and so, in order for hemp to qualify, we've got to make clear that it's not going to get you high. The final products can't be more than 0.3% THC. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about during the process of getting to there, and no one is going to care if there is a vat of in-processed hemp extract that is above 0.3% THC if it's not going to be consumed, and that's where we need to get this fixed.
hmm And then, so then adding on to our timeline, right? So you've got the 2018 Farm Bill. Um, we've just learned that the DEA has tried to impose their IFR, where there's hurdles and challenges that hemp farmers would face, right, when it comes to these spikes and these levels in THC. But then let's look at the other side, and I want you to elaborate on the disconnect between you got one side, which is hemp seen as an agricultural commodity, right? Because the farm bill's passed, but then it's not seen as a dietary supplement, and there's no consumer oversight on the FDA side when it comes to consuming in food and beverage. So talk a little bit about what's going on there.
Sure. So the 2018 Farm Bill said hemp, CBD, other extracts, you're not a controlled substance anymore. They also said that it was in the FDA's jurisdiction to regulate ingestible and topical products. And there had been discussions with the FDA before then. They were going to take that and they were going to issue rules to implement the sale of hemp products. Well, it's been almost 2 years, and the FDA has not taken any formal action to do that. They've held hearings, they've made statements, but they have done nothing to develop a regulatory path for the sale of CBD as a dietary supplement or as a food and beverage additive. That's why we're working now with Congress to try to force FDA to take action. There is a bill that was just introduced about a month ago called HR 8179, introduced by Congressman Kurt Schrader from Oregon and Congressman Morgan Griffith from Virginia. It now has 18 co-sponsors. There are 9 Democrats and 9 Republicans. Shows how bipartisan this issue is. And it would establish that CBD could be sold as a dietary supplement, and that CBD manufacturers have to follow all of the regulations that other dietary supplement manufacturers have to. They've got to use good manufacturing practices. They've got to have truth in labeling. So not only are we going to help farmers by having this regulatory clarity and allowing the sale of these products more often, but we're also going to protect consumers by ensuring that these products are regulated.
Mm-hmm. I'm interested to. I mean, you're meeting with these representatives, right? And so, like, what is it? Why is the FDA dragging their feet on this? Why is it taking so long?
We don't know. I mean, to give them a little credit, there is this COVID pandemic going on. The FDA is certainly and rightfully consumed with this, but their delay was a year and a half before COVID hit, and we still and moving towards what we hope to accomplish, which is simply having the FDA recognize CBD and regulate it like other dietary supplements, doesn't take a lot of work. The science is there. They keep saying we need to see the science, we need to see the research. Science is there. There have been plenty of dozens of studies that demonstrate that CBD is safe. The World Health Organization said that CBD has a good safety profile. Great Britain and Australia both have looked at the evidence and have come out with regulatory plans that allow for the sale of CBD as a food and as a dietary supplement. And it's time for the U.S. to catch up, because you know, I respect that the FDA's mission is to protect our health and safety, but the problem isn't CBD. The problem are products masquerading as CBD that might not have CBD in them or might have heavy metals in them. And we're only going to get rid of those if we have regulation.
Right. Yeah. And it's almost, you just mentioned their responsibilities is to ensure the consumer safety when it comes to food and beverages, but there's unintended consequences, like the emergence of snake oil and carcinogens and vitamin E acetate and different things that are being added to these oils, and people are consuming that because there's no regulation and consumer oversight. Right.
Yeah.
It's almost incredible to me. I've had many guests on where they're just pleading and they're just begging for regulations and some guidance, because it's these unintended consequences include decline in prices, emergence of snake oil, as I mentioned, market saturation, inability to market effectively. The way that CBD is presented by different companies is completely different. They're all over the place. And ultimately, the basic understanding of CBD and its medical properties are being kind of removed.
Yeah, we say this often. Our enemy is not the FDA. It's not even the DEA. Our enemy are these fly-by-night CBD manufacturers who sell products that are snake oil or that have worst of all have potential health hazards in them, and that's why we want to be FDA's partner, not their enemy. We want them to come in and start going after these bad actor companies, and it really has become urgent now for the whole marketplace.
It really has. And I'll tell you, my eyes were really opened last week. I had a guest, and I've mentioned this probably 2 or 3 times in different episodes now. His name is Josh Sweeter. He's the CEO of Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs, and they do a lot of the nationwide reporting for the efficacy of CBD products. And he was saying, I think in 2019, they ran a study within Amazon, sourced all the CBD Amazon products, and 80% came back with no CBD in it, and not to mention 40 to 60% of metals and pesticides and contaminants included in these products. And just to add on to that, in my own experience, I recently launched a brokerage firm, and I'm seeing so much great product just being sat on because the price fluctuations. I mean, people are buying lower quality, cheaper flour, putting it on their shelves, as opposed to buying what the flour is worth at a really high quality with high levels of CBD and other cannabinoids. So I'm just seeing that there's a number of problems, but that is a huge one in terms of no regulation and oversight.
Yeah, and you got farmers who are sitting on warehouses filled with CBD biomass because the prices have crashed, or because the companies that they were doing business with went bankrupt, because investors don't want to invest in CBD until the FDA acts, and big box stores like Target and Walmart and Walgreens and CVS don't want to sell ingestible CBD products because they're worried that the FDA will make them their first target. So it really is important on so many levels, and that's why HR 8179 is so critical for the industry.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know that there's a way in which the U.S. Hemp Roundtable makes it easy for citizens to actually contact their representatives, right, and kind of push these things. So, this is the opportunity now to kind of talk about that if you'd like.
Well, great. Our website is called hempsupporter.com, pretty easy to remember. If you go there and go to our federal resources page, you'll see that we've got several campaigns lined up where you can email your members of Congress, whether it's on HR 8179 or whether it's on the Safe Banking Act, which I imagine has been the subject of your show. We've got a campaign there to try to convince the military to allow CBD products. So each of these issues is very important for the hemp industry. And if you go to hempsupporter.com and you go to that page, you type in your name, email address, and zip code, it will look up for you who your member of Congress is or your senators. It will draft an email for you. We ask that you edit it and put in information about your own personal store or farm or business. And then click a button and your congressman or your senators receive it. So it really is that easy, and we've used this very successfully to generate a lot of support for our legislation.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'll be sure to include some of those links in the description of YouTube at the end. But I want one more thing to touch on when it comes to the FDA, and then I have other things that I'd like to talk about. But I learned recently that the FDA released draft guidelines to the White House Office of Management and Budget without kind of letting any of the public know what was inside that draft. So do you know anything about that? And if so, where are we at with that?
Yeah, no, it was sent to the White House this summer, and no one's seen it. It's been 4 or 5 months since it was sent. They've held meetings with the industry. I met with them a few months ago, and there's no timeline in terms of what's going to happen. I've got friends in the White House who are hemp supporters who tell me that there's a real internal battle going on between agencies, FDA, White House. Some folks want to get tougher on CBD. Others want to provide for formal enforcement discretion to allow CBD sales during the period of development regulation. But it just shows you how messed up this system is, and why we need to have Congress come in and sort it out.
Has there ever been this type of disconnect before when it comes to like nationwide legislation being passed and then one governmental agency who's humongous and another huge intergovernmental agency just not talking to one another and like understanding that they should both work together to figure this out? Or
Yeah, unfortunately, too often this happens. I mean, I don't want to compare our circumstances to 9/11, but that is the ultimate example of what happens when our government agencies don't talk to each other and share information. This is certainly not comparable, but it's just a endemic of our federal system, where you get these little fiefdoms here and there in government, and they don't talk to each other, and it's hard to get progress done.
yeah, it's unfortunate for sure. Well, let's talk about the impact that COVID-19 has had on U.S. Hemp Roundtable's efforts. You know, has it stalled any type of momentum that y'all have had? Have y'all had more discussions about certain regulatory relief packages for cannabis?
Yeah, so we opened up our office in DC on January 1st, which was pretty bad timing. But the good news is my wife and I, we're going to get an apartment up there. We decided to wait until the spring, and thank God we did, because that apartment would be sitting empty. So you see me right now. I'm sitting in my home office in Lexington, Kentucky, and I'm your typical Washington lobbyist operating with a golf shirt on and out of his home office. But to be frank, for my own purposes, it's actually been quite more efficient. I'm able to have 6 or 8 meetings a day, and not have to run across the hill to have those meetings, and I'm able to reach staff that are less harried because they're not having all these people come into their office all day. But in terms of our legislation, it definitely has slowed things. I think HR 8179 would be farther along its way if we hadn't had COVID. The challenge is we've got to be heard by the Energy and Commerce Committee in the House, which handles all healthcare issues, and COVID just has taken up their agenda. So that certainly has delayed things, but it's allowed us more time to educate, and I'm hopeful when they do, the full House does consider the bill, we'll have hundreds of Congress people that have been contacted by me or by their constituents, and understand the issues better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and along the lines of COVID, right? The recent HEROES Act that was presented by the House, it included the Safe Banking Act, right, which
Yeah.
would provide protection for cannabis companies that are outside the THC side, but more focused on hemp. So, what do you know about that relief bill? And do you think it's the right move to include the Safe Banking Act, which is a bipartisan issue, into something that could be seen as politicized or something else?
Well, the challenge of any legislation is it's really hard to get anything passed. Really, really hard standalone. So as we discussed earlier, our hemp legalization bills were both attached to the Farm Bill in 2014, 2018, because those had to pass. They had food stamps in them, they had agricultural relief, and so finding a bill that has to pass is always a good strategy. And I think that's where the House came in. The challenge is it made the Safe Banking Act into a bit of a partisan issue. You saw the president, Senator McConnell, some other Republicans picking out the Safe Banking Act as an example of how the Democrats were trying to load the bill with things that didn't have anything to do with COVID. So it's not going to pass this year. If the Democrats take hold of the Senate, I do believe it will pass pretty easily. It's passed the House pretty easily, bipartisan. I mean, it's not just Democrats, but Republicans. If the Republicans hang on to the Senate, I still think it will pass, but it's going to be more of a challenge, and it'll take some efforts to try to smooth feathers over and make this issue less partisan.
Yeah, that is one issue that I think almost everyone in the industry can agree that has been a challenge and a struggle for them. I would say 95% of every guest that I've had on has said that they've worked with at least 2 to 3 different banks in their time operating their business, just because one day the bank just says, "Hey, we don't want to work with you anymore," or so it's pretty needed for sure.
Yeah, no, it's been a huge challenge, and on the hemp side, it's been getting better, but hemp companies still have problems, and this is not going to be solved until we get the Safe Banking Act passed.
Right, right. Well, let's talk about industrial hemp, right? So after the Farm Bill, I think that it's pretty clear that the majority of hemp farming that's taking place is pretty much the hemp being grown for CBD extraction or any kind of cannabinoid extraction, right?
Yeah, it's about 80% right now, and I just that's not going to last. CBD is I think is not a fad. It's going to remain popular and will continue to grow and grow. But I'm most excited about the industrial possibilities. What we've seen in Europe in terms of hemp plastics, hemp construction materials. A regular chemical plastic product, goes into a landfill and stays there for tens of thousands of years. Hemp plastic is biodegradable and renewable. We started off talking. I'm a liberal Democrat. I started in politics working for Al Gore, and to me, the environmental applications of hemp fiber are one of the most exciting things about the plant. But it's going to take some time and resources. The challenge is developing infrastructure for the processing. I think that's been delayed a bit, again, because of COVID. We saw some promising businesses kind of come and go during COVID, but I'm hopeful this will pick up again once the economy turns.
No, I share that excitement with you. That is what I'm most excited about as well. Is we're talking a lot about the therapeutic value and the medicinal benefits of the cannabinoids found in the cannabis plant, but when you look on the industrial side, when it comes to fiber and hurd and the numerous applications that it has, it's really quite fascinating. So one challenge, obviously, which is what the CBD market kind of saw, was infrastructure, right? You mentioned processing plants not being in place. And from my understanding, to get a processing plant going, and what I mean by processing is the decortication, separating the fiber from the hurd, that's like a $3 million endeavor, right?
Yeah. No, they've been working on Europe for decades because it's not illegal, and it's never been illegal there. But it's going to take some time and resources. But we are seeing some companies that start off in CBD start transitioning into fiber, and because they've been making money from CBD, been able to invest in these processing technologies. One of them just down the road from me here in Georgetown, Kentucky, called Echo Fiber. When I go out on the town, I wear a hemp mask that they make, and they're starting to get involved in a lot of high-tech clothing materials and other fiber products. And I hope that that's just the beginning of a real renaissance for the hemp crop.
Mm-hmm. Well, outside of the infrastructure or the lack of infrastructure, I mean, the supply chain side is basically kind of non-existent because of that, right? Or is
Exactly.
there, right? Okay.
Yeah, no, we've got to build a whole new industry here, and I know there's a lot of interest, but it's going to take a lot of work and time and money.
The real opportunity I see also is hemp within the automotive industry.
Yeah, no, that's a big deal. Henry Ford had used hemp in a lot of his paneling. And Europe, you buy a car like a BMW, the car paneling is going to be made of hemp. And again, there's no reason why we can't see that same sort of progress here in the U.S.
Right. And I mean, you mentioning you being a liberal Democrat, I mean, I'm sure, and working for Al Gore, you know all about the environmental aspects when it comes to hemp, right? I mean, the amount of CO2 emissions that the plant takes in and the sustainability of its products, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, no, it really is. And you know, I'm looking forward to the day where we can figure out how to make it a biofuel as well. And but we're just scratching the surface. We've got to help with issues like what we're dealing with the DEA and with the FDA, and I think we'll get past those. But I really believe that the future of hemp is extremely bright.
What does the raising capital side look within that space? I mean, are there investors that are interested in industrial hemp, or is it just like you said, too soon?
Yeah, well, I mean, there were a whole lot of them in 2018, 2019, and then the FDA um, uh, more negative statements, and then COVID. 2020 has been an awful year, but now I'm starting to hear of companies coming in and buying up distressed hemp and CBD companies because the prices are great, and I'm confident that when the economy continues to grow and we get these regulatory issues worked out, there'll be a lot of investment again.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as we're talking about growing for industrial hemp versus cannabinoid extraction like CBD and THC and others, what are you seeing as it relates to like zoning laws and ensuring that there's no cross pollination between these two grows? Because obviously you could ruin the trichomes and the different potency levels for the cannabinoid extraction purposes.
Yeah, no, we're starting to hear a lot about this in states that have robust hemp and marijuana um, growth permissions, Colorado and Oregon being the two at the top of the list. And that's only going to continue. And particularly, you know, marijuana legalization federally is inevitable. Probably if the Democrats take hold of all three branches of government, we'll see some version of it even as early as next year. And so these are the types of issues that we're really going to have to hammer down on the local level to make sure that both the hemp and marijuana industries are protected.
Mm-hmm. If that doesn't happen, do you foresee like states overturning, or they're just, maybe adult use before federal legislation is overturned?
Yeah, I mean, I just we've seen states go their own way for the last several years, and I think we're going to continue to do so. I think every time I see that there's a marijuana on the ballot, it usually wins. There's what is it, 70% support in the public for it, and if you look demographically, the only opposition are from older Americans. Younger Americans are almost universally for it. So it's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's not the if, it's when.
Right. Which will definitely help, downplay the illicit market right now because, the illicit market is undercutting a lot of California's revenue that they're bringing in. Obviously, they have a pretty high tax rate and whatnot when it comes to their cannabis business operations, but there's other things I think that play a dynamic to ultimately, once federal legalization takes place, the doors are going to be wide open and these challenges kind of won't be apparent anymore.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, it's just a matter of when, not if, and hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm. Well, this was very informative, Jonathan. I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else that you want to cover or leave the audience with before we sign off here?
I just want to, get you involved. If these issues are of interest to you, please help our efforts. Come to hempsupporter.com and sign up. It's free, and we'll empower you to get your voice to your legislators, both at the federal level as well as at the state level. The more of a army we have, the more battles we'll win.
Mm-hmm. And where can people find you online? Your website, social media channels?
Yeah, so hempsupporter.com. Our social media channels are at Hemp Supporter. And you can find me at Recovering Paul, Recovering POL on Twitter and on Facebook. And I sometimes have fun with that. I'll not only talk about hemp, but also bourbon and Kentucky basketball.
Yeah, recovering politician. I can't imagine, man. That is quite the job to have. And so I'm glad to see that you're on the other side now.
Yeah, I am too, and so is my wife and daughters, for sure.
It brings back that human element, right?
That's right.
Well, hey, Jonathan, thank you again. And, we look forward to having you on again as things progress throughout the industry. Okay.
Terrific. Thank you for having me.
Yes. And thank you all for listening. Bye, guys.